Dr. Philip Catney is a senior lecturer in politics at Keele University. Welcome back, Philip. 24 hours might be a long time in politics. This time yesterday, you were telling us that Boris Johnson may only have a few hours left in the job. Has anything changed in those 24 hours?
Well, he's still battling for his position. The powerful 1922 committee met this evening to talk about what it wants to do with this case. One of its vice chairs, William Ragg, has come out and said that the Prime Minister should go. So the Conservative Party is very divided on the issue. Some loyalists like Priti Patel, the Home Secretary, who really owes her job to Boris Johnson's patronage, has been out trying to defend the Prime Minister. Indeed, the Prime Minister has somewhat bizarrely been trying to claim that he is taking the blame for other people at Downing Street, and that this is something which he's been a noble person here. But certainly the performance in the Commons was extraordinary. There was none of the smirking. There was none of the usual bombast we see from Johnson. He was trying to cut a contrite figure, and at one point seemed to be buying time for himself by saying that he's going to wait to see what the Sue Gray investigation comes out with, and then they could all decide what they want to do with him then. He said that several times, in fact, kept repeating, we'll wait till Sue Gray comes out. So it did appear at one point that he might go further when he started making his statement, but then he quickly lapsed into the familiar line that this is his place of residence and this is a workplace as well, and people just happen to go outside and have a drink session outside at work, which is a very curious defence. And what's even more shocking about this is the Prime Minister essentially stood up in front of the House of Commons and acknowledged he was at a party that broke the law. A law that the very chamber had passed. So this is extraordinary that people have not really batted an eyelid at this point, that the Prime Minister stood up and admitted he was at an event that broke the law. And indeed, they kept using the word guidance. This was a breach of the law.
Yeah, absolutely. And many, many people have been prosecuted for doing similar things. Philip, you did it for us very well yesterday. Just to explain for the benefit of international viewers, the 1922 committee represents the ruling party, the Conservative Party's backbenchers. What did you think of the language that he used, saying he believed it was a work event and the theatre almost? We in the office noticed all of those MPs behind him wearing masks, which many, many, many times previously they have not been doing. It was almost as if they were told, look, we have to look as if we're serious about this.
Well, they made sure they got plenty of ministers out today to sit next to him. They're curious not the Chancellor of the Exchequer, who was on another engagement. The MPs, Conservative MPs in particular, have been opposed generally to wearing masks in the same way that most members of the public have. Although in the last few weeks when Omicron started, a lot more Conservative and when Conservative MPs were picked up on this in the media, they suddenly started wearing masks again. But certainly having a mask on has the benefit that you can jeer or pull faces and nobody can tell you're doing this. What was telling from the Prime Minister's performance today is how little there was to screaming and shouting. For international viewers, the British House of Commons is not a noisy place, except for when you get to Prime Minister's questions, when everybody boos and yahs and shouts. And this was one of the occasions where, when Johnson came up to give some of his lines, where he would have probably expected in normal times, a stronger response, it was almost muted at times. So his MPs were not full-throatedly in support of him. Many opposition MP, I've never heard the word resign used so often in a 40-minute session in Parliament. There was lots of anger palpably felt, and many Conservative MPs were looking down at the floor for large parts of the performance today. So whilst they showed up, they put their masks on, and you couldn't see whether they were cheering or not. A mask was a very convenient device for that.
Yeah, interesting. What do you think will happen if he's removed by his own party, or if indeed he resigns, in terms of the future direction of the United Kingdom? There are some who believe that the far right of the party is almost the driving force behind the Conservatives.
Yeah, the Conservative Party is multiple parties in one. It's what we call a catch-all party. It's trying to basically bring together different factions. So you have a libertarian wing, which looks some degree like the American Republican Party, which is very comfortable with the idea of talking about privatized healthcare and civil liberties, but only in particular circumstances. And then there are some Conservatives who are more ecologically conscious. Johnson may put himself in that, others may not put him in that wing, but he would put himself in the more ecologically conscious wing. And there are more traditional Conservatives who believe in society, a kind of traditional hierarchy in society. It's held together. Now, the question is, Johnson was seen to be the libertarian, the free marketeer who's going to lead Britain into this Brexit new world. Now, some Conservative MPs have, on the libertarian right of the party, been very disappointed that he has supported things like tax rises, which a lot of them are going to kick in this April. And there's a lot of dissatisfaction within the right of the party, who were his natural allies. So the problem for Mr. Johnson is that he doesn't really have, his strength is broad, but it's very thin. It's not very deep. He doesn't really have a huge ideological bedrock to fall back on. And so if I think it's more when Mr. Johnson goes, just how long it's going to be. Who replaces him? Is it going to be somebody like Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor, who's been positioning himself as a more libertarian, free market Conservative? Or is it Liz Truss, who's the Foreign Secretary in this country, who is trying to position herself as a sort of heir to Thatcher? So we have lots of positioning and briefing against the Prime Minister coming from inside the cabinet. But as I said earlier, there are people like Priti Patel who pretty much owe their existence in cabinet to Boris Johnson's patronage and are very keen that he stays there. So at the moment, the British government is divided and the Conservative Party is divided. And there's a fight for the soul of the Conservative Party that's going to happen when Mr. Johnson falls.
Philip Catney, thanks once again, Philip. Really appreciate it.